Just want to make sure everybody can see us. Welcome to It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach with your host, Sister A. Legree. It's Getting Better All the Time Mental Health Outreach, providing information and support while encouraging hope and faith. You can go onto our website to find out more information about us and about what we do. igbattmho.org or igbatt.com. Go on our website, find out more information about us, about mental health issues, and other information is all on our website. Thank you for joining us. Today I wanted to talk about involuntary commitment. What is involuntary commitment and what does that mean? I thought about this as I was looking in the news, and see if I can bring the article up. I think by now, if you live in the United States, and many of us have heard what happened in Texas. Into one of the churches. There was a lady who went into one of the churches in Houston, Texas. She had a rifle. She went in. She was shot and killed. Her child was shot and wounded. No one really knows what happened. So I went through and I wanted to share this with you because, you know, we talk about this. This is our mental health in the news segment. And it says here, her name was Janice Moreno. Had criminal history, mental health issues, documents say. And I took this from abcnews.com, abcnews.com on website. It says, the mother-in-law's affidavit, this is from the mother-in-law, says that Moreno should not have been able to own a gun, claiming that under an alias, Moreno had been under involuntary psychiatric commitment at least 4 times. She also claimed that she had filed a fraudulent birth certificate. So they interviewed the mother-in-law. The mother-in-law went on and was sharing certain things. It says here, the mother-in-law, a day after Sunday's shooting at Lakeland Church in Houston, her former mother-in-law posted a lengthy statement on Facebook saying that this should be a wake-up call. She says, my daughter-in-law, when she was taking medication for schizophrenia, was a very sweet and loving woman. She wrote on Facebook, but mental illness is real illness, when family members seek emergency protections, they're not doing so for their own sake, but for the sake of the person who is ill, and to protect her child and society. Her mother-in-law goes on to say, her mother-in-law, who identifies as a rabbi, went on to say that her apparent, I guess, some anti-Semitic utterances had nothing to do with Judaism or Islam or anything like that. It pointed to an untreated mental illness and a lack of strong red flags that would have prevented her from having a gun. So again, we have a situation where, per reports, per history, we have an individual who, with a history of psychiatric mental health history issues, was able to buy a gun, and there was no red flag, nothing stopped her, according to this. But I wanted to talk about here what the mother-in-law was saying. She said she had been under involuntary psychiatric commitment at least 4 times. What is an involuntary psychiatric commitment? Involuntary psychiatric commitment, and they call it different things in different states, but involuntary psychiatric commitment occurs when a person is deemed to be a danger to himself or others. It varies in a particular state to such an extent that it requires them to be involuntary committed. Now here's the thing, what some people don't understand, involuntary commitment may not necessarily be a forever thing. So we talk about on this broadcast what happens, they say, if you have to go to a hospital or if your loved one has to go. So let me just kind of go over that briefly. Let's just say at any point where you or your loved one let's say your loved one, okay? You notice your loved one, they started having some symptoms, they're starting to deteriorate, the symptoms are getting worse. You may have to call whether a crisis team or the police, or you yourself noticing that your symptoms are deteriorating, and you may have to feel like you want to call. It's a little different when you do it. Usually involuntary means just that. This person doesn't want to do this. Okay, let's say the person has taken whether it's a crisis team or by the police, the first step usually happens as they go to an emergency facility, or that's an emergency room. Some states have a particular, like in D.C., we have a particular comprehensive psychiatric emergency facility that just handles emergencies, psychiatric emergencies. The bottom line is, once a person is taken to the hospital, right, that's where they're evaluated. The doctor there will decide if this person meets the criteria for an involuntary hospitalization. The involuntary hospitalization, the initial one, it varies with state, but only lasts for a couple of days. During those couple of days, it's just enough time to get that person stable, because that's the goal of hospitalization. The goal of inpatient psych hospitalization is not to keep a person forever, unless they need to. That's not the goal. The goal is to get a person. We recognize that, especially with severe and persistent mental illnesses, that sometimes relapses will occur, and sometimes the relapses will occur to the extent that they require a hospitalization. That's just part of managing the illness. That sometimes happens. So if that does happen, the goal is to get the person back, get the person stable, to get them back on medications. The goal is to get them to change medications if we need to. It's not a, like I said, forget about what you thought about a long time ago, where a person would go into a psych ward and would never come out again. That's not how it goes. The goal now in 2024 is to get a person stable and back out into the community. So once they go in, depending on where you are in the state, and where you are in the United States, what state you're in, the involuntary commitment first phase can last 48 hours, can last 72 hours, it can last 96 hours. It just depends. Once that time is over, or before that time is over, if the doctor determines that they're unable to stabilize or they need more time, they'll go to a second phase, I call it, where they will request more time. That second phase, it involves it's a legal procedure. It involves that the person will get a lawyer, the hospital or the doctor will have somebody representing them, saying, hey, this person needs more time. So it's a two-step process, if you can think of it like that. But the involuntary hospitalization is not going to be a forever thing. So when they say that this lady had at least 4 of those, the reason why she probably had at least 4 of those is because when she went to the hospital, she stayed there for a little while. I don't know how long she was there. And after a period of time, she was better, and they were able to release her. That's what happens with the involuntary hospitalization. Ideally, once a person is released from the hospital, they are supposed to, or they should be connected to an outpatient mental health clinic. That outpatient mental health clinic will ensure that they continue to get ongoing services. This is why it is important when we talk about assisted outpatient treatment. And this is, I think I did a whole talked about this episode. Assisted outpatient treatment is so important. A lot of people don't like the term involuntary. They don't like to know, okay, this is somebody doing something against their will. And I get that. But we have to begin to understand that there are sometimes certain situations when our loved ones may need this. They may need a long-term, they need to be involuntary committed. If you have a loved one and you know that this person is not going to take their medications once they get out, you know they're not going to follow through, as this woman did. She didn't follow through. Because here's the thing, you can't make a person take their medications. You can't make a person get treatment. You can't make them unless you have an order from the judge, unless they are involuntary committed. You can't make them. Once they're no longer involuntary committed and they're back out in the community, they can do pretty much whatever they want to do. Ideally, we want to make sure that we're getting help, that we're connecting them to a community mental health so they have that support, they have those resources. Also keep in mind, when a person who has a chronic illness such as schizophrenia, if they don't want to take their medications, many times that not wanting to take their medications is part of the diagnosis. So it's not like they're saying, oh, they don't want to take their medications, they meant to do this, they don't want to take their medications, they don't want to care. That's not what it is. Not taking medications is one of the symptoms of schizophrenia. Not taking the medications is one of the symptoms of bipolar, or one of the symptoms of having a severe and persistent mental illness. So this is not something willful that they not want to take it. So just kind of keep that in mind, because I know that can be frustrating when you know someone that needs to take medications and they don't want to take it. Here is the thing: assisted outpatient treatment is what happens is a person goes in for involuntary commitment. If you're the loved one and you know you have an AOT in your state, it's important that you begin to advocate that the hospital, the doctors there say, hey, let's connect this person to an assisted outpatient treatment. Because with assisted outpatient treatment, the judge will mandate certain things. And it will mandate that they'll have ongoing follow-up. It mandates that they take their medications. Because it's one of these things where they go before the judge and they have the opportunity, okay, it's either jail or treatment. You can look at it that way. And many times, if we can get a person to agree to treatment for a long period of time, then eventually the outcomes are better, right? It's much better than you have someone that just goes in for involuntary commitment for 2 or 3 days. You know, you connect them to a outpatient mental health facility. They don't go. Sometimes they don't go, or they don't go, on a regular basis. And then they fall back into the same habits. They're not taking their medications. They start becoming delusions. Their symptoms start to worsen. But if we can connect them to an assisted outpatient treatment while they're already in the hospital or while they are before a judge, that will give them the fighting chance. That will give them an opportunity to get the help that they need on a long-term basis. Just wanted to read some things here. Okay. Okay. I just wanted to share something. When we talk about involuntary commitment, each state, I'm not going to do that because of my computer. Each state, I want you to go to treatmentadvocacycenter.org, and we actually have this on our website. But each state, it varies. Each state varies in their definition. So some states will say the person has to, they're very strict with that definition of a person has to be a danger to himself or others. And then some states are less so. I always tell people, even if you're in a state where it says this person is a danger to himself or others, we automatically think, is this person going to kill somebody? Or is they going to kill themselves? But think about it, broaden it out, right? If this person, you feel your loved one is displaying symptoms that could put them in a position where they will be a danger to others, then that's a problem. So for example, if you have a loved one who is standing out on the street calling people derogatory names, right? The chances are that somebody can punch your loved one or they can hurt your loved one, not understanding that they have a severe and persistent mental illness, that can be categorized as a danger to himself or others. So again, when we look at it's important for you, if you have a loved one with a severe and persistent mental illness, as we preach all the time on this channel, we remind people severe and persistent mental illness are just that. They're chronic illnesses, and just like any illness, it has to be managed. There are symptoms that will fluctuate. There are symptoms that you may be fine for months, for a year, or 2 years, but we're talking about an illness that has to be managed. So part of managing this illness is understanding, okay, what are the rules are in my state? What is the resources in my state? Do we have a crisis team? If my loved one is connected to a outpatient mental health clinic, have I been there before? Do I know the names of the people there? Have I signed the appropriate paperwork to ensure that if something happens, then I am able to talk to someone there. So when we talk about assisted outpatient treatment, what is assisted outpatient treatment? And I'm reading this from the treatmentadvocacycenter.org. Assisted outpatient treatment is a practice of providing outpatient treatment under civil court order to individuals with severe mental illness who have demonstrated difficulty engaging with treatment on a voluntary basis. We know that when implemented, AOT has and can dramatically reduce hospitalization, criminalization, and other adverse outcomes for its target population. Although AOT is authorized by law in nearly every state, most states have substantial unmet need for programmatic implementation. So in other words, while most states have the ability to do it, most states are not. Many of them are not. But assisted outpatient treatment is where you provide outpatient treatment in a civil court order to individuals who have demonstrated an ability to not to connect with outpatient facility, with outpatient services. So assisted outpatient treatment, you may say, well, if it's so good, why are people not using it? Again, you have two sides, just like in every argument, right? You have some people, advocates, who don't like assisted outpatient treatment because they don't like the term you making somebody do something they don't want to do. And I totally agree. People with severe and persistent mental illness have rights just like you and I have, just like anybody else. If they don't want to do it, they have a right not to. But then there are, on the other side, there are people who are saying, yeah, we get that. We do understand there needs to be a balance to this. But we also understand that when you have someone who is ill, and they're unable, that they're not cognizant that their illness is causing them to make decisions that are not helpful to them, that are causing them damage, then we have to help them. I always say, if you and I were walking down the street and you saw one bleeding out, the blood was everywhere, their guts, they were bleeding out, you could say, oh, I'm not going to do anything because they have a right to call the hospital if they want to. They have a right to call 911 if they want to. They have a right, to say no. Well, that is true. But I'm looking at this person bleeding out. Because of the blood loss, they're not thinking clearly. Because of the blood loss, they're not thinking that they're out of touch with reality because they've lost so much blood. So if you ask them questions, they can't even answer correctly or coherently because of the blood loss. I'm not going to look at them and say, oh well. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to look at somebody in that condition, and we're going to realize that because of the blood loss, that they've lost so much blood, they are incoherent. We're going to get on and call 911 and say, hey, can you send an ambulance, send some help? This person's on the side of the road. They are bleeding all over the place. They have so much blood loss that I'm talking to them. They're in and out. They're not clear about what they're doing. They can't, have a good conversation with me because of the symptoms that they're dealing with. Well, similar to a person with severe mental illness, because our brothers and sisters, we see them on the highways, or whether it's in the streets, or in our neighborhood, or they can be a loved one. We're looking at them because of the symptoms of their illness. It's causing them to be incoherent, to be out of touch with reality. Because of their symptoms of their illness, they're bleeding in a sense. They're bleeding. They're not taking their medication. They're not taking care of their health. It's cold outside. They're outside with no clothes on. It's hot outside. They're dressed inappropriately. We see them cutting themselves. We see them just doing things that we know that a person who is well would not do that. So you have a choice. Are you going to allow a person to die with their rights? They have a right to do that. They have a right to do that. That's true. But let's get this person some help. Let's get them to the point where they're coherent enough, where the symptoms have not overrun them to the point that they don't even know what's going on. We want to get them to the point where they're stable enough. And once they're stable, they can say, hey, I don't want to do this. That's what assisted outpatient treatment does. It helps an individual to get to that stable point. Because we know that once an individual gets treatment on a regular basis, AOT has an excellent success rate. So I talked about AOT in light of what happened, as I'm reading the history of Miss Moreno, that she had a criminal history, mental health issues. She had psychiatric commitment at least 4 times, but I don't see anything about an AOT. If she had an assisted outpatient treatment, and that was connected to her, when she went to the courts, and if the courts would have said, or somebody would have advocated and said, hey, let's connect this lady to an AOT, she would have had someone to make sure that she was taking her medication, someone that makes sure she was in treatment. She would have had someone to kind of have a conversation or to get to know her to find out, why is it that you don't want to take medication? Why is it that you don't want to go into treatment, right? So again, having that person, I just wanted to come and talk, because when we have things like that, people want to say, individuals, let me say this, with severe and persistent mental illness are no more violent than the regular population. However, individuals with severe and persistent mental illness who do not take their medications and those who are using drugs are. So we have to be honest about that. That's why medications, that's why treatment is so important. If you have a loved one that is not taking their medications, or And it's not just not taking their medication, but they're not taking their medication, and you see symptoms that are concerning, that are troubling, and your loved one also has a connection with the legal system. That's your cue to talk to someone, to advocate for your loved one, and say, hey, we need to do an assisted outpatient treatment. Can we connect our person? Right? Because there's something about, for some people, having that civil commitment that makes a difference. Because now you're standing before a judge. Now you're standing before a judge. It's a whole process now. A lot of people with severe mental illness go in and out of jail anyway, for various reasons. Many times it's just minor violations. They were doing something on the street, the police wrote them a ticket, they didn't show up, now they have a warrant. It's just minor things that they go into jail for. But when they go into jail, they're victims of abuse. They start having a lot of other, it makes the issue worse. So again, just wanted to come before you and say treatment works. If you have a loved one with a severe mental illness, it's important to encourage them to get support before the symptoms of their illness get so severe that they're unable to comprehend that. If you or your loved one are living with a severe mental illness, it's important that you plan, that you have a relapse prevention plan, you have a crisis plan, you know who to call in the event of emergency, that you have a conversation. If you are living with severe mental illness and you feel as if you need to get treatment, involuntary, well, for you it will be voluntary psychiatric treatment. If you have to go into an inpatient facility, if you have to go to the emergency room and ask for help, do that. Going into an inpatient facility or going to the hospital, whether it's 1, 2, 3 days, can be helpful because it can help you stabilize your medications. Sometimes, you're on medications for a long period of time, and your medications may need to be adjusted, or you may need new medications. Whatever it is, just know you're dealing with an illness that has to be managed just like any other illness. We need to normalize the fact that severe and persistent mental illness, chronic illnesses, are just like any other illnesses. Help is out there. Hope is always an option, of course, but you can manage it. Again, this has been Sister A. Legree. It's getting better all the time. Mental health outreach. You can log on to our website at igbattmho.org to find out more about it.